She could barely lift her arm. Her jaw was almost gone, but she picked up the pen and she signed her name. She was suing the company that had poisoned her, and she was going to win. But let's go back to the beginning. It's 1917, a watch factory in the northeastern United States. To the young women who worked here, this was one of the best jobs a woman could get. Good pay, a clean building, and the most exciting material in the world to work with. Their job was to paint the numbers on watch dials with a special luminous paint. The paint glowed in the dark, which made the watches readable at night. Their supervisors taught them a technique. Put the brush to your lips, shape it to a fine point, then dip it in the paint, then paint. They called it lip dip paint. Nobody told them the paint was dangerous. In fact, they were told it was good for their health. So after work, they played with it. They painted their nails, their teeth, their faces. In the dark, they glowed, and they thought it was wonderful. But here's what the company already knew. Their own scientists had been warning them for years. Radium doesn't leave the body. It behaves like calcium and goes straight into the bones. Once inside, it irradiates from within. The executives knew all of this, and they chose to sweep it under the rug. By the early 1920s, the women started noticing something was wrong. A toothache that wouldn't stop. A tooth that simply fell out, then another. Then the jawbone itself began to soften and break apart. The women were paying the price for something they didn't even know they had been exposed to. When the women went to the company's own doctor, he told them they were fine. He suggested it might be other illnesses entirely, illnesses that carried stigma that would make the women too ashamed to talk. The company was turning a blind eye and paying its doctor to do the same. Then one woman connected the dots. She had read about a scientist who had died from handling radioactive materials. She started asking questions, and she realized every woman who was getting sick had one thing in common: the paint, the brush, the lips, every single day, for years. She started talking to the other women, and every conversation confirmed the same thing. The sickest women were the ones who had pointed the brush with their lips the most. The pattern was undeniable. They hadn't gotten sick by accident. They had been knowingly poisoned by the company that signed their paychecks. Here's what was happening inside their bodies. Bones are made from calcium. Radium behaves almost identically to calcium, so the body absorbs it directly into the bone tissue. Once inside, it never leaves. It irradiates the bone from within, slowly destroying the structure for the rest of that person's life. The women hired a lawyer. The company fought back immediately. They said the illnesses had nothing to do with the factory. They delayed court dates. They filed appeals. They tried everything they could to run out the clock because some of the women were dying, and the company knew a dying witness cannot testify. When the case finally reached court, some of the women were too sick to stand. They arrived in wheelchairs. One could no longer move her arms. The judge looked down at them from the bench, and the courtroom went silent. This was not an abstract legal argument. The consequences were sitting right there in the room. The company settled. Each woman received a payment and a lifetime pension. It wasn't enough. Nothing could undo what had been done to their bodies. But the company had paid the price. For the first time in history, a corporation had been held legally responsible for knowingly poisoning its own workers. The case rewrote the rules. New laws established for the first time that employers are legally responsible for protecting workers from known hazards. The maximum radiation exposure limits used by scientists today trace directly back to this case. Every safety regulation, every workplace inspection, every hard hat, all of it begins here. Today, if you work with any hazardous material anywhere in the world, you are protected by laws that trace back, in a direct and unbroken line, to a group of young women who refused to stay silent. They didn't just win their own case, they changed the rules for every single worker who came after them. Some of the women who fought the case never lived to see the verdict. They died before the settlement was reached, but scientists who visited their graves decades later made an extraordinary discovery. The radium was still inside their bones, still active, still glowing, long after the women themselves were gone. Today, you heard the real story of the women who glowed in the dark and refused to stay silent. They were knowingly poisoned by the company that employed them. They fought back, and because of them, every worker in the world today is safer. If this story made you think, share your thoughts in the comments. For more real stories like this one, stay with us.